We've had a lot of talk about creating content, and the topic here is how global gaming is. We all know how global gaming is, and we really want to, sometimes I can be overly analytical, but I think that's okay for this talk, and how that deconstructs down into different communities, different games, different areas of the world. You have so many different genres, from FPSs to MOBAs to MMOs to fighting games, and they all come and play in different areas. And I think, Michael, you've had experience hosting tournaments in all parts of the world since the very beginning, and you're an important person in the community. Maybe you can start off and tell us a little bit about, that and how different games across different cultures.
Sure. So it's not dissimilar to regular sports, right? Baseball popular in the US and Japan. Fighting games popular in the US and Japan, right? But not necessarily in other countries where it would, I can't imagine an event the size of EVO for fighting games in Europe, for instance, right? So depending on from country to country, and we've held in Intel Extreme Masters events in Singapore, Taiwan, China, Brazil, and the Western countries as well. There are a lot of differences in how the fans consume it in terms of esports, and how Southeast Asia, for instance, very, very fragmented when it comes to which MOBA games they play. Some countries in Southeast Asia completely Dota countries, other countries completely League of Legends countries. So there's a lot of diversity globally. Counter-Strike not very popular, let's say, in China, comparatively to the rest of the world. In China, it's Crossfire.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's sometimes down to how the game is designed and what genre is popular in certain countries. So in China, for instance, they love to have a hero, to have a champion like in League of Legends, and FPS games are not that popular as a whole in China, but also the fact that Steam is not really there in China, that really influences Steam games. So very diverse, both from the point of view of culture and also from the point of view of the publishers that work with those video games from region to region.
Okay. So now that we know that fighting games and baseball have a lot in common, they both in the US and Japan, maybe we could take that a little step further. I think games are based a lot around the communities that grow and evolve out of games. It's a big deal, the community. You always hear the community. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about what kind of communities form and what cultures. And I think as a brand entering in the space, it's a big deal to understand a community before even attempting to try and reach it. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the communities inside these games. I think both of you are more than qualified. If whoever wants to start,
sure.
Go for it.
So my name's Todd, and with Hi-Rez Studios. So we are on the developer-publisher side of the ecosystem. We make the game Smite, which is the #3 MOBA. So we have to try a little harder. There's League of Legends and Dota 2, and then Smite. So certainly the way as a publisher we look at esports as an extension of the community. With a multiplayer game, we're more successful the more people are playing the game, and really we're in the community business as much as we're in the game business, and so esports is kind of a pillar of that. From a brand standpoint, definitely we've learned as a developer that each geography is a bit different. As a friend from ESL mentioned, I think if I'm a brand looking to get into the space, I want to understand geographically where that game is strong or not, right? It might be community reasons, it might just be platform reasons. In China, there are more players of free-to-play PC games than there are people in the United States.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a free-to-play game and looking at these crazy numbers, for many of the games, a large portion of that population are China players. That might be interesting, or it might not be interesting to you as a marketer. With our game, for instance, it is available on the console. So you can play Smite on the Xbox or the PlayStation. You will not find a console in China, at least it's pretty hard. But you'll find a lot of them in Western countries, so our game tends to be actually over-indexed in, say, the United States and Western Europe. So it does break down quite a bit by platform, and certainly understanding the community that plays that is a key part of success.
What about the competitive tournament aspect for you guys?
Absolutely. So again, like communities are the key for esports. Esport is a consequence of having strong communities getting together, and that's true both on a global level, but also most of all on a regional level. So what Michal was saying, it's really a consequence of how many people are engaged with a specific title, how many people are interacting around a specific title. And community is really not just playing the game, but everything that happens around the game itself, whether that's watching content, watching esports, or engaging on Reddit or forums, or playing on competitive platforms and so on. So the way we look at the market is really understand which communities are more developed, where, and then there we see an opportunity to give the right tools for them to engage at all different levels, starting from the grassroots level, making players more engaged, but going up all the way to the top level with professional competitions and professional tournaments, and the millionaire prize monies.
Yeah.
But again, like everything starts from the community. If there's not enough critical mass when it comes to community around that game, the esports piece, it's never going to work.
I mean, we've had examples in the past in esports of developers trying to and companies trying to push certain games. An example would be Painkiller, which there was a kind of running joke. There was 17 people globally playing that game, and all of them were playing it in that professional circuit.
Yeah.
So
who was championing it internally?
It wasn't, it had nothing to do with ESL. It was another company.
Okay.
Actually, I think one of the top guys at FaceIt with Mick ended up third, I think, in the World Championship.
Third player in the world in
out of 17.
Out of the 17, but they had a $1 million prize and everything.
Wow.
It's just that the thing in esports is that for the vast majority of games, not all, your audience will come from the player base. Right. So let's say a game like League of Legends or Smite might be horrible to watch for somebody that doesn't play it, but the sheer volume of the community is so large that 1% makes it as big as a baseball broadcast.
Yeah. So I think there are some games that people who don't play watch more than others and can understand and follow. And do you think that that's changing in this day and age more and more as esports becomes a bigger thing? Are you seeing more of a push for that? Or
I think overall, ultimately, any form of entertainment will be about people's stories. Yeah. So if you get into, the Tiger Woods story, you're going to get into golf somehow, right, even though maybe you don't necessarily play it.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to be a player of a particular game in order to enjoy it, but until now, the vast majority of the viewers came as players of that game. This is changing, obviously. Counter-Strike is very accessible. You can follow that. You can very easily follow all those stories, all those great players, and it's going to change much more to the direction of if a game is accessible, people will watch it. If the content is produced in an interesting way, and if the stars are compelling. But I don't think we are close at all, like at least 5 years until we have a game that has more viewers than it has players.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, and two things that are sometimes neglected when it comes to viewership. So the reason people are watching, again, all these games that are successful have a tremendous player base, and there's an aspirational nature. So the only thing that stands between me being the best in the world at Smite or League of Legends is my skill, right? I don't need to be near a hockey rink and afford hockey equipment. If I've got an online connection and a PC, I can get there. So that's tremendously powerful. And two, I actually learn from watching the stream, because platforms like Twitch and YouTube Gaming and others, I can see the best in the world and I can interact with them, and they'll actually answer my chat. So, I gain skills from watching them. So that educational component and that aspirational nature kind of help the top end of the pyramid support players that are amateurs and just want to get better. And that's kind of a big part of why the whole thing works, at least with the current generation of games.
Gaming is probably one of the most rapid skills you can improve just because of ease of accessibility. All you need is internet connection and a game, and you can get to the best if you got what it takes. So I think here we can shift to talking about, we just spent time dissecting how it's geographically different in different areas. But the cool thing about gaming is that it's geographically immune to a lot of the things that traditional sports have as barriers. And you could become the best player in the world very easily as a gamer, but not so easily for traditional sports. But let's spend some time and talk about how that reach, that global reach, affects the way the games are put into the market, as well as how a brand could reach people. Why don't we start, and why don't we talk a little bit about, you told me a lot earlier about how you are geographically distributing your prizes based on different factors. So I think you have a lot to speak about with regards to the localization or not localization of the...
Sure. My name is Matthew Pierce. I'm from Versus Systems. We built a prizing and promotions engine. It's a B2B play that actually goes into games where brands can offer their goods, whether they're physical goods or digital goods, into the games as prizes. And publishers and developers can offer prizes to their players, so, to drive additional engagement, to keep the game fresh, to keep the game fun. And with respect to the global piece, we realized very, very early on that we needed to make our tool very adaptive to different games, adaptive to different geographies, because obviously, and each game, in fact, right? Because certain games have certain demographics that appeal to, different kinds of players, and some of them are very highly competitive games. Some of them lend themselves to laddered tournaments. Some of them lend themselves to esports. Other games are going to inherently sort of shift and be more casual. And the idea for us was to engage the whole pyramid. The esports, I think, drives a lot of excitement. It certainly drives a lot of the spectators. It's why people watch, to see the very best. But for us, the idea that we could bring prizes to people that don't want to be the best in the world, they just want to be the best in their office or the best in their house or the best on the block. And so the way that we did that is we created this platform that has the ability to identify who you are and where you are and prize you out with prizes that are both legal and in your jurisdiction, things that you can legally win, but things that are contextually relevant, right? We talk a lot about authenticity and making sure that players are getting stuff that they really want. Being able to match brands to players is a whole lot easier when the players get to choose what they're playing for. And for certain games, it might be things like consumables like Doritos or Rockstar Energy Drink. And for other games, it might be apparel. And for other games, it might be concert tickets. And for other games, it might be, it's actually really funny. I was just talking to you guys about it. We were talking about India. We were approached by a telecom that actually wants very much to offer prizes that they want to sponsor. They want to provide, clothes and food and all sorts of different kinds of prizes. But what they're really doing, the people that are paying for it are the telecom providers, because the telecom providers want to get people to buy data plans instead of just buying voice and text. And that's something that we can offer because the platform is really flexible. But the idea, you come up with all sorts of things all the time where you'll run into a geography, and that geography has certain needs that because you're not from there, it didn't even occur to you. So you have to make your platforms really flexible so that they can be adaptive to the different cultural and community needs of that group.
Yeah, it's interesting, but one of the more interesting things also is not only is it specific for the geography, let's say you host a tournament somewhere, and I think both of you can really talk to this, but how many people who are watching a tournament in the United States for a specific game are from the US as opposed to the rest of the world? And how does that easily affect the people who are trying to get brand time in that?
So for us,
yeah.
For us in Intel Extreme Masters, when we have a North American event, it's about 45% of the viewership is from North America. So over half of the viewers comes from countries other than the US and Canada most of the time. And the US actually, for almost any event we do, is between 18 and 35% for non-US events. So the audience is very much global, where a lot of the people will tune in to the broadcast from anything from 120 to 180 countries to any given broadcast. And that's one massive difference, I think, for how esports is consumed, because traditionally television segments that by geo very, very efficiently and very rigidly at the same time, whereas a guy in Ukraine can stream and have 50,000 concurrent viewers from all over the world and be able to reach fans all over the world and be able to represent global brands, whereas so the paradigm is really shifting. Brands need to think globally, in the sense that, okay, I'm sponsoring the Super Bowl. I know it's the U.S. market that I'm paying for. But if you go to ESL1 New York or E-League or anything else, it's not just the U.S. market. And if you have a U.S.-only budget, then you have to face the fact that some of your dollars are going to waste, air quotes, simply because it's completely open to the global audience, and I believe it will remain so.
Yeah, and I think there's also a little bit of a confusion in the esports field. People, it's always been global, and now there's a few pushes to try and make it even more regional, as opposed to the marketing going global. There's now, traditional team owners, team sports coming in. Let's make it more regional. And I know, Mick, you had some thoughts on that and how that might affect the ecosystem, and so maybe you can share that with us.
I mean, on one side, the association between traditional sports brands and esport players or esport teams could be a positive thing in drawing a new audience to esports. Because obviously, if I'm a Liverpool fan and all of a sudden Liverpool has a FIFA player, I might be more interested in watching a FIFA match than I was before. At the same time, there's a huge difference, as we were saying. Esports is extremely global. So when we're talking about a Cloud9 fan or a TSM fan or a Fnatic fan, it could be anywhere from anywhere in the world, really. There's no geographic correlation. So, for example, Fnatic, they're based in the UK, but I think probably most of their fans are Swedish, because they have a very strong Swedish team. And so, TSM and Cloud9 are in Los Angeles, but fans are really global, are coming from all over the world. So there's a risk when you associate a team, an esport team, to a very specific geographical location. There's a risk of alienating part of the fans that you already have. And on this, I like to quote the founder of Immortals, Noah. He said, having regionalized teams gives you a higher floor in terms of potential fans, but it caps your potential growth in terms of overall number of fans that you can have. And again, this is all in theory. In reality is, we don't have many examples of this in the past. Maybe the CGS back in the days was kind of a similar structure, but it's really hard to judge how this is going to impact the market. But obviously there are pros and cons around the geolocalization of esports clubs and teams. And
how would you say that affects the brands trying to come into this space right now with the attachments to the global? Do you think that being a regional brand is a big disadvantage if you're getting into esports, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Global brands can activate globally and get a much higher ROI compared to brands that are too specifically focused on geography. And that's true in esports much more than probably any other type of content and form of entertainment.
But I agree. I think that there's no reason that it can't be both, right? If you've got an effective set of tools that can market and provide pricing or provide these kinds of branding and advertising opportunities to players, there's no reason that it can't be both global brands and also local brands. That the right tools can take advantage of a player who is playing in Los Angeles, who is playing against a team from South Korea, who's being watched by a bunch of guys in the Ukraine, right? Like that if you're using the right tools, then you can provide the players with opportunities to access the benefits of certain brands, but the spectators get a different experience, right? The spectators can reach different, or can see different ads, can see different prizes, and if you do it that way, then you can get. I hope that you if you're reaching the players and the spectators where they are, right? If you have a location verification mechanic inside of it, there's no reason why we can't be. It's going to be global. To your point, we don't have a choice of whether or not it's going to be global. It's going to be global, but you're able to be both global and specific, both global and regional.
Well,
sort of at the same time.
Just two quick observations. So traditional football. So Hi-Rez is in Atlanta, right? I jumped on the Falcons bandwagon. Of course, I got crushed at the Super Bowl, but I hadn't followed football, the whole year. I don't follow it. I follow esports, a little college basketball, but it was my home team. So I jumped on the bandwagon, and I think that's very powerful and can't be denied in esports, and that's why the winds are blowing in that direction. And then more personally with esports, we had a choice in setting up the Smite ecosystem, and we decided we would at least have kind of continent-based structure. So like the Olympics, like Latin America is going to get a spot, and Brazil had a spot, Australia had a spot. So we haven't gone all the way to the City League, and we saw that work really well, because at the end of the day, people are tribal and they want to rally around something, and that's just a built-in way for people to be attached. So I think it's clearly going in that direction. If you look at the endemic esports teams, many of them this year have already kind of signed up in one way or another with a different organization in traditional sports that has a city league, and I think that it may put a cap on one particular team or market, but the entire ecosystem benefits over time with things heading in that direction, as long as it stays authentic.
I don't think so. I actually think that there's no major downside to, say, starting a team out of London. But the main reason why sports teams are rooted to a home is economical. Roger Federer, the tennis player, he doesn't monetize any particular area just because a tennis player does not have a court that he hosts games in. Fnatic doesn't have, a stadium that they host games in, and it's not likely that in the next 5 to 10 years they're going to be able to monetize a self-sustaining esports stadium, simply because that's not where esports is today. Whereas Chicago Bulls, every time they have a game, it's upwards of $1 million in revenue. That's a very good reason to be rooted to a home. However, Chicago Bulls did not become a global brand because of the city of Chicago, but because of Michael Jordan. And if you look at sports traditionally, all the leagues, all the big sports leagues, NBA, NFL, MLB, etc., were started before 1950. And everything kind of before 1950, where the monetization model is the stadium, gate revenue, concessions, all of that stuff. All of those kind of very old construct, traditional ones, they got started before 1950. Anything after 1950, golf, tennis, MMA, they don't care where the players are from. They don't care about geography. All they care about is, can I make this guy a global superstar and monetize him everywhere? Mm-hmm. So I think while the fact that there's an esports team out of Chicago or anywhere else, is that a detriment? No. Is that a game changer? Absolutely no.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a game changer, but I'll point out two things. One, at least at a continent level, the discovery system for new talent, because of just logistics of server ping, like at a minimum, you're going to have to choose Europe server or NA server or Southeast Asia server. So at a minimum, the discovery system of rising through the ranks in a game like League of Legends or Smite does put you at least on a continent, and that's just kind of until technology gets there. We're going to at least have that amount of regionalization, whether city adds or detracts.
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah. So I think we're running close to being out of time. So
Yeah, we probably have time for a question.
Question.
There's a question right over there.
This question is from
Let's wait till we get the mic. Again, we have a lot of people watching on the live stream at Ayzenberg.com and AList.com. Those of you on the live stream, thanks for hanging in. We got a mic coming up, and we're going right here. Go for it.
This question is from Matthew from Versus. So being able to play for prizes on a global basis is really exciting, but how do you handle the legality of that? I mean, you must have a really impressive legal team.
The legal piece is a whole thing. I joke that we, for a very long time, had more lawyers than we had engineers. It's and because we needed them. The idea of different regions, especially when you're playing, pay to play, or when we're playing in a competitive, landscape for prizes where there's any sort of consideration from the player's perspective. And it's augmented even more when there is a spectator relationship rather than a player relationship, because it goes from being a very obvious game of skill to being a game of chance as soon as you're not participating in it. So just being able to understand that at both a local and and a global level, I think it's super important to be able to do it effectively. And it does go back to this question of location in a lot of cases. A lot of, in the United States, we're this ridiculous patchwork of, state laws, and so being able to navigate that on the one side. And then Europe is a shade easier. Asia looks easier, but might be harder. but yeah, just being able to sort of incorporate that into your prize distribution system and into your player identification system, that's going to be a big part of all this going forward, I think.
Yeah, time for one more question real quick, if anybody has one. Otherwise, we are going to move on. Amine and team, thank you guys very much. That was awesome. Really appreciate it.